So Valentyna sent a message that she is not coming to present. So we have 4 presenters with Yasemin. So you will have more time than 15 minutes. So it's fair. Now it's Shegirbayev Ozhet's paper. He's from Nazarbayev University, Kazakhstan, and he will be presenting a paper on comparative overlook to the Central Asian political transit scenarios. The floor is yours, Shegirbayev.
Thank you very much. 1 second. Yes. Okay, do you see it? Can you see?
We see the presentation, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. One important point, I'm not from Nazarbayev University, as I wrote, I'm an alumni from a new, I work as an independent research. Well, my presentation, my paper is about comparative overlook to the Central Asian political transit scenarios. Mainly it's about succession of power in Central Asian countries. So plan, firstly, we will look at the current models of power transition, which we have in Central Asian countries, which means Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Each country will be overlooked separately, some main nuances, and third, what's important is only dates and facts will be used here. So, okay, the models of transit, according to the Hale, is a la Deng Xiaoping, when you have slight transition of power without dying in office, without the electoral transit, without some kind of problems. It's like in Kazakhstan, and what is a best example is Deng Xiaoping by himself, how he transited power, and the case of Singapore, when Lee Kuan Yew slightly gone to the shadows, but he preserved the post of the minister counselor as guy who stands over the president and give him the counsels how he have to act in this or in this situation. Death in office, it's one of the not good scenarios for autocratic countries like Turkmenistan and in Uzbekistan. But as we will see further, mainly for the country itself, it was mainly successful. And electoral transit, which we can see in Kyrgyzstan and in Tajikistan. Why it's written here that in Kyrgyzstan it's semi-successful? Because not every electoral transit is good in Kyrgyzstan, and it's good. So, for instance, Mr. Atambayev, he was elected according to the constitution. Last year in August or September, he was taken to the jail. Another example of Mr. Bakiyev, who also was elected by all the legislation, and now he's in Belarus as oh, you understand. And in Tajikistan, it's mainly successful. Okay, let us look here. In Tajikistan in 1994, during these elections, Mr. Emomali Rahmon wins. So he was not the first president of Tajikistan, but he still stands on the rule. What is important is, according to Mr. Ivanov, how Mr. Rahmon became the president in 1994. It was a period of the civil war in Tajikistan. And Mr. Rahmon, he found the support from the warlords who were in charge of the actual life in Tajikistan. In 1999, he made a referendum on prolongation of his term. In 2015, they get the law on peace and unity founding father, leader of nation. In 2016, there was a referendum and age qualification for president reduced to age of 30. Why is it important? Is because his son, Mr. Rustam Rahmon, is currently mayor of Dushanbe. And in near future, they will have the election of the president. And there was rumors, actually it was just rumors and the positions of several political scientists who suppose that his son, Mr. Rustam Rahmon, will try to go to the elections to become the president. But now Mr. Mlrzlyoyev, he said that, okay, I will go to the elections. So we all suppose that Mr. Rahmon will be the president again. Why there was a rumors and why there was thinkings that Rustam Rahmon will become the president? Because they were looking to the example of transit of power a la Deng Xiaoping, because when the ruler dies in the office, sometimes it's good for the country, but it's not good for relatives of the ruler. This is Mr. Rahmon and Mr. Rustam Rahmon. Kyrgyzstan, semi-electoral changes. So in 2005, we had the Tulip Revolution. In 2010, we had the revolution against Mr. Kurmanbek Bakiyev. Why? It was because Mr. Bakiyev, he was actually seduced by corruption. In 2016, they made the constitutional reform by strengthening of prime minister power. So they were moving to semi-presidential parliamentary system. And in 2017, Mr. Zheinbekov wins the presidential elections. Here, it's important to understand that Mr. Zheinbekov and Mr. Atambayev, the previous president, here it's Mr. Atambayev, it's Mr. Zheinbekov, they were from the one party. There were actually analysis and there was a proposal that Mr. Atambayev will become the prime minister of country when Mr. Zheinbekov will become the president. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And as I already said, in August last year, there were problems with Mr. Atambayev when the guys from the Committee of National Security, they came to his house. There was a siege of his house actually around for 2 days. And after 2 days, he said, okay, I'm going with you. And last 2 months ago, Mr. Atambayev, he was put into the jail. It's an important point because it means that parliamentary system, when we say about the parliamentary system, it works in Kyrgyzstan. But when we talk about the parties, we have to understand that it's not actually the parties, the moving forces, it's actually the clans which stands behind these parties. So Mr. Atambayev, Mr. Zheinbekov, the representatives of the coalition of the southern regions of Kyrgyzstan. Turkmenistan, here I will show you why it's bad when you do not make a transition a la Deng Xiaoping while you are alive. In 2007, Mr. Sapar Murat Niyazov died. Mr. Berdimuhamedov became acting president. Instead of Speaker of Parliament, Mr. Otayev, according to the constitution. According to the constitution, Mr. Otayev, he became the president next to Mr. Niyazov, but actually he said, no, I will not try to do it. Mr. Berdimuhamedov, he will do. Why? Because Mr. Berdimuhamedov, he take the support of Ahal Vilayat, of the main clan, which actually lives in Turkmenistan. And Mr. Niyazov, he also were representing the interests of this clan. As we can see, Mr. Berdimuhamedov wins the elections with 89 of votes. In 2010, he gets the Arkadak title, it's stronghold of the nation, like Mr. Emomali Rahmon, by the constitutional law. In 2011, 18 heads of region were dismissed, and actually it's current practice of Mr. Berdimuhamedov when he criticized representatives of the regions. And his son, Serdar Berdimuhamedov, is currently governor of Ahal Vilayat. Before he was, as I remember, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. So he actually prepared him to his political career, as Mr. Rahmon is doing actually right now. Why is it important in case of Turkmenistan? Because the son of Mr. Niyazov, Sapar Murat Niyazov, the dead president of Turkmenistan, he was not in age to become some kind of politically significant. He was around 18 or 19 years old when his father died. And after the death of Mr. Sapar Murat Niyazov, his family just disappeared. Mr. Sapar Murat Niyazov, Mr. Berdimuhamedov, and son of Mr. Berdimuhamedov. And he is in the position of Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. Uzbekistan, Mr. Karimov, he was one of the elders of the Central Asian region. In 1995, he prolongated his duties as president. In 2002, he made a referendum to extend his authority. In 2016, Mr. Shavkat Mirziyoyev became acting president instead of Senate Speaker, Mr. Yuldashev. It's just like in Turkmenistan. Also, there were another person who wanted to become the acting president, Mr. Azimov, Rustam Azimov. He was deputy prime minister under Mr. Mirziyoyev, but unfortunately, as we can see, he lost this political battle 2 or 3 days after death of Mr. Karimov. Mr. Azimov just disappeared for 3 days. And during these 3 days, Mr. Mirziyoyev became the acting president. After it, career of Mr. Azimov declined. Now he is head of some of kolkhoz, which is responsible for the chicken meat. In 2016, 2017, they get the deal with Mr. Inayatov. Mr. Inayatov is the former head of the Committee of National Security, KGB of Uzbekistan. And it's important because Mr. Inayatov, he was a Grey Cardinal under Mr. Karimov and had a strong relationship with his daughter, Dinara Karimov, who is actually now under judicial consideration. Main changes after death of Mr. Karimov. Mr. Karimov, he tried to distance from the real politics his last days. Instead of him, Mr. Mirziyoyev, he's trying to act more actively, be more active in all the issues. So all issues of creation of special economic zones, for example, they established by the presidential decree, and all other important points of political, economical, social life in Uzbekistan is changing by the presidential decree. Mr. Karimov, Mr. Rustam Azimov, whose career is actually declined, and current president of Uzbekistan, Mr. Shavkat Mirziyoyev. And Kazakhstan, case of Kazakhstan, in 2000, well, Mr. Nursultan Nazarbayev was ruling by Kazakhstan since 1989, when he was head of the Communist Party of Kazakhstan. In 2012, we take the law on first president, leader of nation, just like in Turkmenistan and Tajikistan. In 2018, there were changes in the Security Council legislation, by which I mean the strengthening the power of this organization, giving the head of this organization more duties, more responsibilities, and more power. And in 2019, 22nd to 21st March, he dismissed from the office. This is a good example of a la Deng Xiaoping scenario. Currently, Mr. Nursultan Nazarbayev is head of Security Council, Nur-Otan Party, the leading party of Kazakhstan, Assembly of People of Kazakhstan. Why the Assembly of People of Kazakhstan is important? Because this organization has the quotas for the Senate. Around 5 or 6 quotas, so 5 or 6 representatives from the Assembly of the People of Kazakhstan, they have quota to become the senators of Kazakhstan. Why the Senate of Kazakhstan is important? Because the chairman of Senate, in case if something happens with the president, became the acting president, like was with Mr. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, who actually was the chairman of the Senate. And when Mr. Nursultan Nazarbayev dismissed from the office, he became firstly the acting president of Kazakhstan. And as we can see here, he won the election with 76% of votes, which actually can be said in comparison with Mr. Nazarbayev and other presidents of the Central Asian republics, it's not so huge. Actually, they take around 99% during the elections. And what is important, Mr. Nazarbayev is a member of Constitutional Council. So as we can see here, Mr. Nazarbayev, he took all power, but now he trying to be in the shadows. And the main political figure is Kassym-Jomart Tokayev. But every important issue in the life of country have to be consulted with the head of the Security Council, who is Mr. Nazarbayev. Here we can see the succession, no one of Central Asian countries do not take succession. There is a try in Tajikistan, there were try in Turkmenistan, but it didn't work. Kazakhstan, there were rumors that Dariga Nazarbayev will become the future president of Kazakhstan. She was the chairman of the Senate, but now she was dismissed from the office. Now she without a job, so no. And Uzbekistan, as we can see, no. Strongman, what does it mean, strongman? The strong ruler in the head of the country, on the top of the country, yes. Mainly, yes, in each country of Central Asia, like Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, everyone tries to make his power absolute. Here, that's why we take such kinds of titles like leader of nation, Arkadak, Yelbasi, etc., etc., etc. The problems with Kyrgyzstan, they would try with Mr. Bakiyev and Mr. Almazbek Atambayev, but they tried actually failed. And no, we don't have we have the strongman from the economical social side in Uzbekistan, but mainly Mr. Mirziyoyev, he tries to take expertise from the government. Preserve power, yes, in Tajikistan, in Turkmenistan, in Kazakhstan, yes and no. Why? Because actually Mr. Nazarbayev, he tries to preserve power, but he stepped out into the shadows. In Kyrgyzstan, no, they cannot preserve power just because they cannot do it. Because if they try to do it, they all know that they had already 2 or 3 revolutions. The person who came and say, I will take the power for the next decade, he'll be dismissed from office by the people. And in Uzbekistan, it's too early to say because Mr. Mirziyoyev, it's his first term, maybe in the next terms. And transitions goes quietly, mainly, yes, except for Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. And mainly when the transitions goes by the scenario of death in the office, it's good for country itself because it goes quietly. Nothing actually changed so critically, but it's bad for the family of the rulers, which actually in terms of country is not so important. So that's all my presentation. That's already said it. Thank you very much. I'm ready for questions after the session.
Okay, thank you, Shegirbayev, for this comprehensive comparison of the power transitions in Central Asia. Now, following your comparisons, we are going to talk about individual case of Uzbekistan. We have 2 papers coming on the analysis of internal strategies of Karimov and Mirziyoyev, and then our other paper also about the Uzbekistan under Mirziyoyev. So it's Otabek Akromov. He will be presenting comparative analysis of internal strategies of Karimov and Shavkat Mirziyoyev. Okay, floor is yours. Otabek, are you here? I think he's not here. Actually, we have started very primitive images of Uzbekistan at the beginning with the from the movie and ended with a very modern image of Uzbekistan. So we have started our panel with an early years of Soviet Union and how symbolism and propaganda plays a role in nation building of such a multi-ethnic, multi-national group of states. And then in our second paper, we have seen the story after the independence, after the dissolution of Soviet Union. So we have seen from the Shegirbayev's paper that how different Central Asian republics managed to transit power from leader to leader. And finally, in Przemystaw paper, we have seen the case of Uzbekistan and Mirziyoyev attempts to modernize, attempts to make Uzbekistan as a regional power. If you have questions, you can raise your hands. To start the discussion, I have one question for each participant, starting with Yasemin. So I wonder, so you are doing your research in the United States about this propaganda movies from Soviet Union times.
Sorry, can I stop you right there? I'm actually doing, my dissertation is about Turkish TV series in Bulgaria and Russia. So this is just something that I did in order to find out what was done historically. So kind of to juxtapose that with what Russia is reacting to with its own media texts now against Turkish series. So, yeah.
But anyway, your presentation, your study was really interesting, and to see how, yeah, I mean, so there is an interest outside Russia about this early Soviet Union propaganda movies and posters, etc. There are many research I heard about, I read about. What about Russia? Is there a interest, academic interest, or any popular interest to this earlier propaganda movies? So this was my question to you. And my question to Shegirbayev, you have presented Central Asian republics, how the power transitions realized in these 5 republics. I have actually 2 questions to you. First one, why didn't you include Azerbaijan? And the second question is, how these leaders' relations with Russia affect their succession or the sustainability of their rule. And also in the last case, Uzbekistan case, how you didn't mention about Russia at all in your presentation, Przemystaw. So how Russia affects this modernization and the regional power project of Mirziyoyev. So these are my questions. So when you answer these questions, starting with Yasemin, so we will get questions from the audience too. I'll try to find and watch them. Thank you. And thank you, Ozhet, saving me trying to read your longer name. Please, its floor is yours to answer my question.
So you're always welcome. First question was about Azerbaijan. Well, yes, if we remind Bzezhinsky Zbigniew and his chessboard game, Czech game, I don't remember how it's pronounced correctly in English. Yes, he said that Kazakhstan is the shield of Central Asia, Uzbekistan is the soul of Central Asia, and Azerbaijan is, how he said it was, well, the meaning was that it's a way of, for Central Asia to the Europe. But actually, if we look now, yes, mainly ethnically, we are all Turks, well, except for Tajiks, the Persians. But mainly now, when we are talking about Azerbaijan and main authors, they're saying that Central Asia is 5 states: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan. But if we take into consideration Azerbaijan, we will see that, yeah, it will be the case of succession of power. Actually, one of the successful cases of succession of family of Mr. Aliyev, but no, mainly because of that mainly political scientists. Now they think that Central Asia is 5 countries. Of course, there are a lot of rumors and talks about the terminology. If you look to the terminology of UNESCO, we'll see that Central Asia, it's not only the states, but it's mainly geographical, the South Siberia, West China, but I just use the political terms. And the second question about it was about the influence of Russia, yeah? What I have to say is that each of our countries is a sovereign country and it's our inner issues. So we have to decide by ourselves how we're going to do it. But the main point here, which is important, is that one of the first visits which each leader, new leader of Central Asian countries, is Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, or Tajikistan. The first visits they're doing to two countries. First is Russia, and the second is China. So that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer. Okay, thank you. Anyone asking who wants to ask question to our speakers? Please raise hand button, use raise hand button, or just send your question here. Anyone?
I've got a question for
Yes.
Ozhet, if possible.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Ozhet, I really enjoyed your presentation and the comparative element of it. I thought that was very informative. But I've got a question for you. I don't know how much information you have about these clan structures within these different Central Asian countries, but I think that they're very interesting. And I was wondering if you had any comment on what seems to me to be a contradiction where there's multiple clans in seemingly all of these, or at least certainly in Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan, but you have generally successions of power within very small circles. It doesn't seem like these clans and their differences really enter into these transition processes at any point in the historical review that you presented us with us there. So I was just sort of wondering if you had any thoughts maybe on how these clans are still relevant, if they don't actually intervene in transfers of power, or sort of what the distribution of power among the clans is characterized by at this point. Really, anything that you have to say about the clans would be interesting for me. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Well, regarding the clans, it's mainly on the level of rumors. The one notion about the clans, it was, as I said, it was connected to Mr. Rahmon when he was elected first time in 1994. And there is actually an article by Mr. Ivanov, I suppose, if I'm not mistaken. And he wrote that actually, yes, warlords, they supported him, and that's why he became the president. And there were also one official article about Mr. Niyazov, that he used his tribal connections to become the president in the beginning. And that this clan is actually from Arkhal Vilayat, is one of the leadings. About the clans, it's actually is not the case of scientific papers. It's mainly about some kind of journalistic investigation. I think so.
I see. So there's really a lack of empirical information about the clans in general.
Yes, and why not? And why not everyone write something like articles about this in Kazakhstan? There is books, there is articles, but they publish not in Kazakhstan, not in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. Mainly they wrote by the Kazakhs, Uzbeks who lives abroad.
Mm-hmm.
So I think so. Because
so maybe more of a,
like it was said in the Soviet movie, East is a tiny thing, Vostok дело тонкое.
Okay, that's a very interesting answer. That's sort of how it seemed to me from my English-speaking perspective, but that's interesting to hear that it's a similar situation even within the region about the lack of information. Thank you very much, Ozhet.
Thank you for your question.
Any other questions? I think we don't have any other questions. So if I may, Özgür Hocam, I will be closing down this panel. So thank you for all the participants presenting their very interesting papers, and the organizers organizing these panels and conference under these crazy conditions. So we are all attending from the different parts of the world. It was a very exciting for me, actually. So thank you for all. So hope to see you tomorrow and the day after in other panels. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Excuse me, may I ask a question?
Ah, yes, there is a question.
I'm sorry, maybe I lost something, but when's the final deadline for submission the full paper?
Okay, for organizer.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Özgür?
Actually, we will email the participants about this issue. You know, possibly it will be 30th of October.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.